dropping Tabby at Penn Manor High School an hour late. Throughout the questioning, police did not let on that Laurie Show had died from her injuries. She was still alive when her mother arrived home, therefore she was also still alive when her killers made their hasty retreat. When the interview was complete, detectives mentioned that Laurie Show was dead. Tabby Buck wept on her mother for almost 20 minutes upon hearing that news, then went home after nearly 3 hours of questioning. Though Michelle Lambert's initial story matched those of Butch and Tabby, once she professed her innocence in Laurie's death, it began to shift. No one had yet to admit to even being at the Show condo that morning. Michelle eventually did. At first, she claimed to have stayed downstairs after an unaware Butch dropped them off. Next, she said that she was inside the condo, but that it was a crazed Tabitha Buck that had savagely attacked Laurie. Michelle always maintained back then that Butch was ignorant to their plan. Both Butch and Michelle had a warrant, so police had a reason to keep them in custody until they had time to gather proof that they were Laurie Show's killers. Tabby was allowed to go home with her mother while investigators worked. Butch told police that the clothing the girls had been wearing had been washed, then bagged and discarded in the dumpster behind a McDonald's. It had been taken to the landfill already, however, investigators were able to get to it before it was obscured by other garbage. Not only did they have that clothing, but they had also found part of the rope that had been around Laurie's neck, as well as the murder weapon, a knife with a broken tip, missing from a matching set found in Butch and Michelle's trailer. All of that evidence had been pulled from the Susquehanna River as per Butch Yunkin's instructions. Once police had the evidence as well as the autopsy results showing Laurie died by homicide, all three were charged with the murder. Tabby Buck was picked up 24 hours after the murder. Butch and Michelle were picked up from the Lancaster County Jail, and the killer trio were arraigned amidst a throng of press Saturday evening. Butch was charged with hindering apprehension. His bond set at $1 million, a shocking turn for the athletic yet shy boy who'd grown up living amongst and working for the Amish. Lisa Michelle Lambert and Tabitha Buck were held without bond, both charged with first-degree murder. 17-year-old Tabby would be tried as an adult after taking part in a murder with a woman she had only known for 3 months. She had met the couple through her ex-boyfriend. They just hung around the same group of people. Once her boyfriend was gone, she continued to hang out with the couple mainly because they had a car. Unlike her target, Laurie Show, who was set to turn 17 herself the following month, Tabby had not grown up in Amish country. She had been born in Alaska, into a blended family with 8 children. Her father found it hard to stay in one place for long throughout her childhood, and the family moved all around the country from Alaska to Florida. At times, they were destitute, once living for months outdoors, camping style in the Oregon wilderness. Other times, Tabby's father worked away from the family and they lived in poverty, while her mother struggled to support them with little skills. After separating and reuniting several times, Tabby's parents eventually split for good when she was in the 5th grade. Her mother reunited with her first husband at the wedding of her eldest, and the two grew closer over the following months. Tabby moved with her mother so they could remarry, and that's how she ended up in Lancaster County. She wasn't fond of her stepfather and wanted to live with her dad, but instead went to live with an older brother who was still in Oregon. Tabby excelled there and enjoyed her sophomore year, playing in the band and doing well in school. Tabby's mother and her old/new husband separated after a while, and she returned to live with her mother, who had come back to Oregon. The child's happy reunion didn't last long, however, because her stepfather fell ill, and the pair went back to Amish country to take care of him. She attended high school and worked, and eventually came to meet Michelle Lambert. They weren't even very close, and Tabby would say that she actually found the obsessive, explosive nature of Michelle and Butch's relationship off-putting. Tabby didn't even realize that Michelle's name was actually Lisa until after Laurie had been killed. Speaking of Lisa Michelle Lambert, she gave birth to Butch Yunkin's daughter while in Lancaster County Prison in March of 1992, just under 3 years after the once love-struck couple had met at the pool. Her trial for the first-degree murder of Laurie Show began in July of 1992, in front of a judge only, as she had waived her right to a trial in front of a jury of her peers. The defense felt the media coverage of this terrible crime would severely inhibit the chances of finding a fair and impartial jury. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed, contact lens-wearing Michelle was a distant memory, and a more natural-looking Lisa Lambert was who now stood before them. Laurie's mother and other family members sat on opposite sides of the courtroom as Lisa Lambert's parents, who were raising her baby. Horrific details of the murder laid out in court as the prosecution and the defense took their sides on the issue of whether Laurie Show was able to utter dying words, given the extent of the slashing wounds made to her neck. The state called a multitude of witnesses, from cops to neighbors to random strangers who could assist in laying out the timeline and help to establish where everyone was and when. Several of Lisa Lambert's friends and acquaintances testified that she became obsessed with humiliating or hurting Laurie, and she had commented on multiple occasions that she wanted to kill her. Butch Yunkin testified against his daughter's mother in return for a lesser charge of hindering apprehension. The defense proposed that Lawrence was lying and that he was the true killer. All parties traveled to the crime scene during the second week of trial and were able to see in person the door upon which a photo in court revealed a startling bit of evidence. In blood that smeared down toward the carpet, it appeared that Laurie had written out 2 letters, T and B, alleged to be the initials of her killers. When Lisa Lambert herself took the stand, she claimed that the attack was Butch and Tabby's idea, and that they had told her about it after the plan was already in the works. She said it was Tabby who orchestrated the phone calls to set up the fake meeting with the school counselor, and that she didn't find out about it until it had already happened. The rest of her story was detailed and differed in many of the details that were in the 3 earlier versions of her tale. It was basically the opposite of what Butch had testified to. She now put him inside the Show condo, an active participant in the killing, while she remained merely a bystander. Lisa testified that she had lied to the police in prior interviews as a means to protect Butch, her unborn baby's father, but gave up any intention of continuing with that when she heard he was to testify against her. At closing, the defense downplayed the importance of the last words uttered by Laurie to her mother, Michelle did it, because their expert witnesses had testified that she likely couldn't speak. And they also had the photos of the T and B written in blood on the bottom of the bedroom door, which they said further discredited the mother's claim. They said this wasn't first-degree murder, and that Lisa Michelle Lambert wasn't even technically an accomplice, since per Pennsylvania law, an accomplice must participate in the actual crime. When it was their turn, the state etched out a timeline of all the altercations and attacks unleashed upon Laurie by Michelle and Butch leading up to the police report. They contended that Laurie accused Butch of rape, and that's what really motivated the murder. They were looking to eliminate her so that the charges could be dropped. Nothing else really made sense according to the prosecution. After a 2-week trial, the judge found Lisa Marie Lambert guilty of first-degree murder on July 20th, 1992, and she arrived for the penalty phase wearing a white ball gown. An expert for the defense testified then that Lisa had disclosed that she had been previously gang-raped by East Lampeter Township police officers, something she made him swear not to reveal. However, he felt that knowledge of the incident could shed light on her behavior. She was spared the death penalty and received life in prison at the age of 19. 17-year-old Tabitha Buck was next to go on trial on September 21, 1992, after not cooperating with the investigation into Laurie's murder and not testifying against Lisa Lambert. Butch Yunkin was back to testify again, having avoided his own trial by taking a plea in exchange for his testimonies. His maximum sentence was to range somewhere between 3 and 7 years. He maintained that he drove the girls around, not knowing or caring what their intentions were that day. It was early in the morning when they showed up at the show's condo, so he said he assumed her mother would be at home. The state called witnesses whose statements were designed to place Butch elsewhere, like at the McDonald's, during the time Laurie's murder was thought to be taking place. A friend of Michelle's testified that Butch didn't take part in any of the discussions she had had with Lisa Lambert when she would approach her about abducting Laurie to humiliate her. One of Laurie's ex-boyfriends testified that he saw Tabby slap her once, but Tabby has always denied that ever happened. The defense called 2 witnesses: Laurie's mother, who was only questioned about some makeup found in Tabby's purse, which seemed to match makeup missing from Laurie's room, and a co-worker of Butch's who testified that he'd said he couldn't attend the work Christmas party because he had to kill some girl, then threatened his life if he told anyone. This apparent lack of motivation on the part of their daughter's public defender did not sit well with Tabby's parents. At closing, the defense pointed out that no physical evidence was found that linked Tabby Buck to the crime, and not only that, but Laurie's last words placed blame on Lisa Lambert. It only took part of a day for the jury to unanimously find Tabitha Buck guilty of murder in the 2nd degree, for which she received an automatic life without parole sentence on October 1, 1992. She wrote Laurie's mother from prison to proclaim her innocence, but gave no further details as to the true identity of the killer or killers. After 5 years in prison, Lisa Michelle Lambert was successful in convincing a federal judge to see potential for habeas corpus relief. He forwarded the handwritten letter he had received from her to a big law firm, and a new attorney agreed to take her case pro bono. Her new attorney said she could hear innocence in her client's voice the first time they spoke. And she did well by her client, successfully proving that some of the statements in the trial testimony of Lisa Lambert's friends were planted by police. That friend even pled guilty to disorderly conduct as a result. The new attorney determined that Lisa Lambert likely had been raped by multiple police officers in the summer of 1991. They uncovered an edited video of a search and doctored crime scene photos, as well as evidence which had been destroyed or switched. It was also discovered that both Laurie's mother and neighbors saw Butch in his car on the morning of the murder, and that the prosecution knew but failed to make the defense aware of this information. If Butch had been